Isaiah chapter 40. I would ask that you would flank me again this morning with your prayers. Pray for me, that God may speak to me and through me so that he may be glorified. Isaiah chapter 40, verse number 28 declares, Hast thou not known, hast thou not heard, that the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, he fainteth not, neither is weary. There is no searching of his understanding. Verse 29 says, He gives power to the faint, and to them that have no might he increases in strength. Even the youths shall faint and be weary. Young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Our key verse, even the youth shall faint and be weary. Young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Amen. I want to talk from this thought quickly today, church. Keep on keeping on. That's what I want to talk about. Keep on keeping on. Keep on keeping on. Colloquial phrase which we use in the African American community. Keep on keeping on. Last week we celebrated the loss of John Lewis, and I wanted today to really highlight the life of one of our elders who has now become a part of that great cloud of witnesses. His name is C.T. Vivian. C.T. Vivian was able to muster a certain sense of courage in the face of violence. He was a master strategist in the civil rights movement. Matter of fact, he was one of Dr. Martin Luther King's most trusted deputies. It was Dr. Martin Luther King who said of C.T. Vivian that he was the greatest preacher who ever lived. The life of C.T. Vivian is in many ways the story of the modern black freedom struggle. Vivian actively participated in the Nashville desegregation movement. He participated in the freedom rides as well in Birmingham, Selma, Chicago, and other chapters for the fight for civil rights. He was born in 1924. He moved in central Illinois, and he was from a tiny black community. He graduated from high school and went to Western Illinois University. Later on, his first civil rights protest was in 1947. He wasn't new to this in the 60s. No, he had been protesting. As a matter of fact, it was in Peoria, Illinois. He desegregated the lunch counters in Illinois. And here's how he did it. He got together, and what they did was they decided to use nonviolent action, nonviolent direct action in the face of segregation in order to challenge the nation. Later on, he went to American Baptist Theological Seminary, now American Baptist College, and he worked with John Lewis, and they went to school together, and he worked with Diane Nash and James Lawson, and they studied again Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolent direct action, both as a tactic and an ideology. And now, as I was thinking about our current context and what we're going through in this nation, many times when you look at society and the sickness that surrounds us and what we're forced to live in as black people, it can really get you down. It can get you depressed. I mean, how many of y'all know during this season, and especially this coronavirus, you've had times times in which you didn't even want to get out of the bed, you know. You have a headache for no reason. I mean, you don't feel well. Depression and darkness seems to come over you, and now, especially when you topple on top of all of the racism that we're dealing with, now we have to deal with losing our loved ones and not being close to them and not being able to hold them like we want to hold them and not being able to be close to them and walk with them during their last moments here on this side. But hear me, Zion, in the midst of what we're going through, in the midst of everything we're going through right now, I believe our cloud of witnesses that now includes John Lewis and C.T. Vivian, I believe they will tell us from Zion to keep on keeping on. Don't get upset. Don't get discouraged to the point to where you give up, but keep on keeping on. And why do they have the courage to tell us this? Because they've been through what we've been through, but many times they've been through worse than what we've been through. And if they can make it through what they went through, who are we now to turn in and throw up and give up? No, we got to keep on pushing forward, because if our ancestors made it through, we can make it through as well. Tell somebody, type it on the screen, keep on and keeping on. Keep on keeping on. Isaiah gives us some help today. Isaiah tells us, listen, you don't have to give up on God. You don't have to give up this fight. Fathers, hear me, don't give up on your family. Wives, hear me, don't give up. Mothers, don't give up on your children. Hear me, don't give up, don't throw in the towel. Keep on keeping on. Isaiah tells us how we can keep on keeping on. Isaiah tells us how we're going to get through this season and any other season that comes our way. Isaiah gives us 3 principles. I'm going to give them to you and I'm going to get out of my way. I get out of your way. Isaiah says it this way. He says, the first principle that will keep us keeping on is number 1. God will give you the strength to handle the stress. God will give you the strength to handle stressful situations. God, I'll say it again, will give you the strength to handle stressful situations. Here it is, verse 29. He gives power to the faint. When you're ready to give up, he'll give you more power. He says, listen, and to them who have no might, he increases your strength. He'll give you strength to handle the stress. He said, even when you shall think and be weary, young men shall only fall. Here it is. They that wait upon the Lord. See, some Bible versions just preach themselves. You ain't got to do a whole lot of exegetical stuff. Some Bible versions just preach themselves. He says, they that wait upon the Lord, he's going to renew your strength. In other words, when you get weak, he's going to strengthen you. Y'all, I used to pray when I first got saved. God saved me for this, and God take me out of this, and God deliver me from this. But hear me saying, I've learned since I've been walking with God, I don't need him to take me out. As long as he's in it with me. Funny story years ago, and I want to piggyback off it today about this grandfather and his grandson. If you grew up in a black community, you know, like me, grandparents have a certain connection to their grandkids that many times parents don't even have with their own kids. Grandparents have a certain kind of connection with their grandkids that parents many times don't have with their own kids. So the story is told of this grandfather who was babysitting his grandson one day, and the child's mother, came home, and she saw how the grandfather was spoiling the boy. He was spoiling the child in such a way. She said, listen, Daddy, I'm not going to raise those spoiled babies. I'm not going to pick them up every time they cry. I'm not going to do those things. And the grandfather, you know how grandparents are. They get soft in their old age. You know, they don't care about rules and stuff like that. They said, listen. She said, listen, don't pick him up and don't pat him on his back. Don't do all that every time he gets mad. She said, I don't want him to be spoiled in that respect. So she began to cook a meal, and the baby began to cry. And so the grandfather goes again, and he picks up the child again and pats him on the back and says, it's going to be all right, baby. It's going to be all right. And the mother comes from cooking her meal and comes back to the grandfather and said, listen, I told you, don't spoil this baby, because once you go, I'm going to have to deal with the spoiled baby. He put the baby back down, and y'all, later on she began to cook her meal even further, and the baby started to cry. Of course, the grandfather goes back a second time stressful situations. C.T. Vivian proved that to us. One of his most famous moments in the movement was a showdown against the notoriously brutal sheriff in Selma, Alabama. His name was Jim Clark. Sheriff Jim Clark. C.T. Vivian, like I said before, the civil rights movement, he already had success with nonviolent direct action. So here's what he did. He decided to register people in Alabama to vote. He sent 1,400 black Selma residents to the courthouse to register when he arrived in Selma. And one particular day, while they had the cameras on, Clark had ordered a line of 100 people to be outside of the courthouse on a rainy day. You can Google it when you go home. And C.T. Vivian is on the steps of the courthouse speaking to the sheriff. He says to the sheriff, you can turn your back on me. He says, but you can't turn your back on the idea of justice. He says, you can turn your back now. He says, you can keep your club in your hand, but you can't beat down justice. Here's what happened. Sheriff Clark responded by punching C.T. Vivian in the face, sending his body down the courthouse steps. Hear me out. But what happened was, even though Sheriff Clark thought he won by him knocking down C.T. Vivian, he won the battle but lost the war. Because when America saw what happened to this black man in the South, it led to the passing of the Civil Rights Bill. And I love our elder who's looking down on us right now. It was his brilliance and his courage in his humanity that allowed him to stand up to a sheriff even after being punched in the face. And y'all hear me? I love what he did. He used their laws against them. And y'all hear me, y'all? We can't get tired in fighting for justice. We just got to be smarter in the ways that we do it. God will give you the strength to handle stressful situations. Isaiah tells us that, C.T. Vivian tells us that even if you get punched in the face, get back up. Get back up and continue to speak truth to power, because hear me, Zion, God will take care of his children. He gives us the strength to handle stressful situations. Number two, God will help us soar over our storms. What Sheriff Clark didn't understand was C.T. Vivian was living on a higher plane. I wish I had a witness in here. What he didn't understand was C.T. Vivian, even though his feet was on the courthouse steps, his heart wasn't on the courthouse steps. He had already developed a relationship with God. And when you know God for yourself, your feet may be on the ground, but your spirit is somewhere else. Do I have somebody know what I'm talking about in here? That's why I tell folks, you got to be careful how you treat a child of God, because God has his hands up. He says, God will help you soar over your storms. He says, they shall, here it is, mount up with wings as eagles. Mount up with wings as eagles. Mount up with wings as eagles. Isaiah is using figurative language here, but what he's doing, he's using powerful, poetic language. But what he's doing is he's showing what God will do to help us get over our situations. He will help us soar over the same things that we were stuck in, y'all. I know we can't do it that often now, and many times it's a different situation when you try to go fly, but I'll never shall forget flying one day right here from Louis Armstrong Airport. I know, which is the irony of the situation. Louis Armstrong never did decide to come back to New Orleans, but we named the airport after him. Isn't it ironic what we do to our black folk? We don't let them come and play down here, but because of segregation. But now later on, we want to name an airport. That's just irony. That's free. Hear me, y'all. What we did was, me and my wife and I, it was raining that day. We get on a plane and we fly over on to another state. While we're flying over, I began to look out my window, and when I looked out my window, I saw, once we got up to 10,000 feet, 20,000 feet, 30,000 feet in the air, I noticed, hear me, that it was no longer raining and storming where I was. Thank you. It was no longer raining and storming, but keep on keeping on. God will give you the strength to handle stressful situations. God will help you soar over your storms. He says he shall mount up with wings as eagles. I'm flying on a different plane now. I'm in a different atmosphere now. And hear me, Zion. I really want to do it, but I know I don't have a lot of time. But hear me. When you're at a different level, you got to walk different. You got to live different. You got to live different. The story is told by Pastor Jeffrey Johnson, that blessed my life. Listen, y'all. The story is told of some airline pilots who ended up crashing a plane. When they found out why they crashed the plane, they looked at the black box. Of course, the black box has all the information. They found out the reason the airline pilots crashed the plane was because while they were at 30,000 feet, they were making maneuvers that they shouldn't be making at that altitude. Because when you're at a certain altitude, there are certain things you shouldn't be doing. So what they did was they ended up taking the lives of other people because they were at a high altitude making the wrong moves. Here's what I'm trying to tell you, child of God. If God has given you the strength to soar over your storm, be careful about the moves you make while you're up there. Amen, somebody. Even though I may want to do something to you, I can't do something to you. I know C.T. Vivian wanted to punch that sheriff in the face, but he said, I can't do that because I'm walking on a higher plane, and if I resort to violence, then I'm going to lose the moral high ground. It's funny now that people don't want to adopt the tactics of nonviolence. Hear me, y'all. I've never understood people who want to stop doing stuff that worked. I was at a witness in here. It worked for them, but now we want to change our tactics. No, we got to maintain the moral high ground. We can't hate them just as they hate us. We can't kill them just as they kill us. No. Martin Luther King said it this way. He says, hate is too great a burden to bear. I can't hate you just because you hate me. I can't lie on you just because you lied on me. I can't make up stories about you just because you make up stories about me. No, I got to keep on keeping on. He says, God will give us the strength to handle stressful situations. Number two, God will help us soar over our storms. Last but not least, God will sustain you when you are sick and tired. It's the last thing. God will sustain us when we're sick and tired. Okay, here's what he says. He says, they shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. He says, listen, when God is on your side, not only will he help you to mount up as wings as eagles, not only will he help you soar above your storms, but now he says no matter what situation you in, whether you are running or whether you are walking, God will sustain you. Hear me, Zion. The same God who sustains us in the air is the same God who sustains us on the ground. Let me show you how good our God is, how powerful he is. Our God is so good that when you pray in New Orleans, he'll hear your prayer in New Orleans. Then when you get on the plane, if you're like me, when you get on the plane and your ears start popping, and you start feeling some of that turbulence, and you pray on the plane, God, please don't let this plane fall. God will sustain you before you get on the plane. I wish I had a church over there. He'll sustain you when you get on the plane, and he'll sustain you when you get off the plane. Anybody know what I'm talking about in here? Here's what I'm trying to tell you. Whatever season you are in your life, we got to trust that the God we serve will sustain us. I'm going home. Hear me, Zion. Hear me, Zion. He recalled, C.T. Vivian died in 95. He recalled before he died in an interview about the freedom rides on the bus. Y'all listen and hear me. We talk about this all the time. I tell folks all the time, it's easy to talk about people, but it's harder to be in it. See, a lot of people up north was talking about what they were doing down south, but it's a whole different thing to get punched in your face. See, it's easy to say what you would have done. See, that's why I got a problem with our new generation. Stop talking about our elders, talking about what you would have done. And I would have never been a slave, and slavery wasn't real, and foolishness like that. No, it's easy to Monday morning quarterback what you would have done had you not been there. No, he says, while he was in Jackson, Mississippi, on a freedom ride, they stopped so young people could use the bathroom. And now, when they got off the bus, they all were arrested. Oh, C.T. Vivian, all of them were arrested. They were taken to the Jackson City jail for a week, and then they were put into Parchment Prison. While in Parchment Prison, C.T. Vivian was beat with a belt. Hear me out. He was beat with a belt with a sharp edge on it. And now he said the pain felt like each blow ripped into his skin. Felt like they were beating him to the bone. If you can imagine, y'all. He said, but then suddenly, all of a sudden, the beating stopped. He says he was bleeding profusely, and they brought him back to his cell. He said because he was the leader, when he got back to his cell, a guard in the prison held a 38 pistol to the back of his head. He said he was feeling something on the back of his neck. He turned around and looked into the eyes of the guard. He said he didn't say anything. He said but he had the courage after getting beat in his head to stare a white man in the eye. Now y'all don't know what that means. Back then you weren't supposed to look white folk in the eye. But here he is bleeding profusely in jail, not knowing what's going to happen to him, but he stares a man with a gun in his face, stares a man in his eyes. C.T. Vivian said, I don't know what happened. He said, all I know is that the man, instead of shooting me, dropped the gun and he walked away. He says one of the freedom riders, a white young man, he was released from jail on that day. But before he was released, he saw bloody C.T. Vivian. He saw what happened to him. And y'all, the young man began to contact the people in the movement in some kind of way. The word got all the way up to President John F. Kennedy. Because when they got up to John F. Kennedy, the word got back to them that, listen, they were not supposed to harm the freedom riders. And y'all, because of what they did to C.T. Vivian, they released them all. And C.T. Vivian gave an interview. He said, listen, I got to tell you that the civil rights movement was mainly a spiritual struggle. It was strategic, but it was spiritual. He says, listen, the only reason that man didn't shoot me in my face was because God was with me. That's it, I'm ready to go. He said the only reason that he didn't shoot me in my face was because God was with me. He said when others got back to Nashville, he said the first sermon I preached was I was saved by the blood. Did you hear what I said? was watching TV one day. We were watching a new Karate Kid. Now, I grew up in the 80s, so I remember the first Karate Kid. I remember Mr. Miyagi and Daniel's son. See y'all so young. I remember Wax On, Wax Off. Now I remember in my house watching the new Karate Kid. We saw him, Jaden Smith, Will Smith's son. And y'all, I remember watching it, looking at my baby, and Mason ran downstairs. He said, Daddy, he said, what are you watching? I said, I'm watching the Karate Kid. And wow, when he came downstairs, he saw the scene where a bunch of Asian little boys was beating up on this black boy. He sat down for a little while. He said, why are you watching this? It doesn't look too good. It doesn't look too good for that black boy. And I began to explain to him how the story is. I said, son, even though you don't know this story, I said that this story is simply a remake. Now, I got a witness in here. This story was already told before. This ain't nothing but a remake. And I said, here's what I'm tell you. Even though that black boy is getting beat in the streets right now, I already know how the story's gonna end. Because I've already seen the end. And all I'm trying to tell you is that we got to keep on keeping on. Because we already know how the story ends. Come here, Paul. Thanks be to God who causes us to triumph. Here's what I'm trying to get you to see. If you're a child of God, you already. Hold on. God's unchanging hand. Keep on keeping on. Keep on keeping on. C.T. Vivian teaches us we've already got the victory. We've already won. We just got to show up for the battle. We just got to show up. Zion, I know this is a hard season for all of us. This is a strange season for all of us. And when those thoughts of depression and discouragement come on you, you got to learn how to beat those things back. Say, not today, Satan. I got too much waiting on me on the other side. First of all, I already won. Look what he says. Whether you're flying, whether you're running, or whether you're walking, he says, whatever you need, he'll give you strength to do it. He'll help you mount up. When you get tired of running, he'll give you strength when you're weary. And when you're walking so long, it seems like you want to give up, he'll give you strength so you don't faint. In working out, I work out, and I heard a quote one time. And the guy said, when you're doing push-ups, sit-ups, running, jogging, running some miles, playing, whatever you're doing, he said, look, your mind will give up 100 times before your body does. In other words, it's a mental battle. And if the enemy can get your mind, then he got the rest of you. If the enemy can make you quit, he's got the rest of you. I'm going to talk about this probably next Sunday, but listen, that's why Paul says you got to put on the whole armor of God. You got to guard your mind. Cast down any imagination that comes to the knowledge of Jesus Christ. You got to cast that down. Because if he can get your mind, he's got the rest of you. My encouragement to you, Zion, is keep on keeping on. If you want to know what gave C.T. Vivian the strength to stand in front of racism and fight for us, and don't get it twisted, he didn't stop fighting during the Civil Rights Movement. He created a program in Chicago called Upward Bound. I don't know if you guys remember Upward Bound, maybe this too. But he sent thousands of kids to college. And even today, his institute is still training people, because C.T. Vivian understood that we got to train every level of our people. Everybody ain't going to college. Some people ain't going that way. So we got to train every area. And that's what we got to do. We got to keep on fighting. Even when the battlefield changes, we got to be creative and keep on fighting for God's people.